This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
Welcome to the One Human Nation show. I am your host, Sandy Batiste. Welcome to show 31, actually. And we have a special guest that will be joining us today. She's actually in the studio with me. And so I want to do a little bit of prep before we welcome Christy to the show. And hopefully you've been following some of my postings on Facebook as we get ready for today's show. I do want to emphasize that the viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So as part of the preparation for today's show, one of the, and I hate to use the word trending topics because it sounds like it's not important, or it makes it to be like a flash in the pan where it's going to come and go and hopefully we won't have to deal with it. As you know, with any topics that we talk about race or racism, it's about creating an environment that's safe, honest, open, and productive. And in order to do that, we also have to be able to look at some truth and many truths that are very unpleasant, very painful. In the topic today, we're going to be looking at the sexual harassment complaints and kind of this culture that we have in this country and in fact all over the world towards female and women and girls about how we look at this whole topic of harassment, sexual assault, rape. And as I was preparing for today's show, I just kind of took a quick look on the landscape. And I'm not going to mention any celebrity names because I don't like to give power to that. But I just took a quick look based on the tipping point of the one that came out from the Hollywood arena. And I counted 28 individuals that have now been accused of sexual assault. And that's including the person from Hollywood, 28. And if I'm not mistaken, that's probably in a span of less than 2 months. So there is no telling how much more that we're going to see. And I wish there was a way that I could say, it's probably just the Hollywood industry or it's just, that's the culture in corporate America, or that's the culture in the military. But unfortunately, it's not just an isolated case. It's, let's take a look at how big the problem is and really start dissecting what we're looking at and what we're really need to be prepared for, because we talk a lot about making sure you take care of yourself also. So as you listen to today's show and as you keep engaged with some of the topics going on, it may trigger something in you that really is very stressful. So monitor that, take care of that, and at this point in time I am going to welcome Christy Edenfield, and she is the leader of the Savannah Taking Action for Resistance, the acronym STAR. So Christy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I want to make sure that we've got you programmed in. So Christy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Sandy.
And so I always like to start with just a little bit of background and how you found your voice in this arena and what was your trigger point, or what experience did you have that that kind of resonated for this to be something that you're involved in now?
Right. STAR addresses a wide number of issues. But the issue that I work most on and that I'm most passionate about, and it's a completely volunteer organic organization, is the issue around violence, sexual violence, particularly violence against women. And I first found voice for this issue. I had had several instances in my life prior to this where it personally affected me, but I didn't find a voice for this passion until I was in college, and somebody that I know was raped on campus. And the very next day, one of the head administrators set out a memo to all of the faculty that the girl that was raped on the campus had lied about it, and the police had not even started their investigation. And one of my professors came to me and showed me that memo. And so I made copies of that memo and went door to door on campus, letting all of the women know what the college was doing and trying to hide the rapes that were occurring on the college campus.
And about what year, what time frame was this?
That was in the 1980s.
1980s. Because I know that was the other thing in doing some of my research, that it's still an ongoing issue on college campuses, because that's one of the places where people are sending their kids with the expectation that they're going to be safe. And I know from my personal experience, I guess I lived in a bubble, because I think we all kind of walk around thinking nothing can happen to us.
Right.
And when you're in that college environment, yes, you're studying, but you're also there in an environment that's not really real. And it's very easy to think that you're in a safe place, when you're really not.
That is very accurate. And 1 in 5 women, when they are in college, are raped or sexually assaulted before they graduate. And girls are most vulnerable there, especially their first semester of their freshman year, because they're away from home for the first time, and just a number of reasons. They are very vulnerable that freshman year. And we tend to frame the argument or the issue in that we need to teach our girls not to get raped, when we need to be teaching our boys not to rape.
Right.
And so just going off to college is very, there's a lot of violence that occurs on these college campuses that you don't hear about. I have a teenage son, and when I take him to college tours, if a college tells me, we have a 1 in 5 chance. We have a lot of gun problems on this campus. We have a 1 in 5 chance, a 20% chance that your son is going to get shot while he is on our campus.
Right.
I would not send my child to that school.
Right.
But that's what we're dealing with when we send our young women off to college. There's a 1 in 5 chance, 20% chance that they will be raped. And the reasons why the colleges are covering this up is because it's not good public relations.
Right. Exactly, which is, I think, similar to why a lot of cities will cover it up, the particular communities will cover it up, because, especially in Savannah, it's a tourist city, and you want to attract people to come to your city, and you won't come to a place that you don't feel safe. So one of the things I do want to reference and talk more about was this information that I pulled off the internet, and God love the internet. You can, good or bad, you can find a lot of information there. And this one was specifically about ethnic differences in the experiences of sexual assault victims. And it was a study that was pulling together information coming through NYU. And as I was reading through this information, number one, what struck me was that there was extensive research that's been done over the decades. Yes. So this is not something that hasn't been researched before. So there's actually data out there to start taking a look at this. And one of the things that still wasn't clear to me, Christy, when I looked at this, when I tried to get my head around this, was, is there a particular group of women that are more inclined to be victimized. And so when I looked at some of the research, it basically stated that it's sexual victimization is across multiple ethnic groups. And then there was one study that revealed that white women were assaulted more frequently than other ethnic groups, followed by Latinos, Black women, and then Asian women. And then there was another group that said, no, it's Latinos that are more likely to be victimized. Another study that basically said, no, it's Native American, indigenous people more to be victimized. And then there's another study that said, well, no, really, it's Black women that are more likely to be. Right. So can you speak to that and kind of give us some clarity on that? Because I think, yeah.
Rape is the most underreported crime.
Okay.
There is a lot of shame. For instance, my son has a friend who was recently raped, and she had just got her driver's license, and she was 16, and she was driving here in Savannah, downtown area, and she had a flat tire and got out of her car and to look at the tire, and somebody hit her over the head, pulled her into an alley, and raped her. After somebody came to her assistance, she went back to the home that she was leaving, and when she went to the police station and they were taking the report, the first question that they asked her was, what were you wearing? And she was wearing jeans and a long sleeve shirt. And so because of that, and many other issues that go along with the wall of silence and the code of shame, is the fact that many women do not report. But I have often said, especially when speaking with elected officials about this, is that it is a nonpartisan issue.
Get closer to the mic.
A rapist does not ask you before they rape you if you are a Republican or a Democrat. It is a crime of violence, and so it crosses all ethnic, community lines. It crosses across the board.
So let me do a little mic check here, because I'm not picking you up as much as I think I should. So Can you speak in the mic for a minute, Chrissy? Again.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone.
I know. For some reason, I'm coming through loud and clear, and I'm not picking you up as much. So we are back with our guest, Christy, talking about the topic of sexual assault and what's been going on, especially in the community of Savannah. So, Christy, I'm hoping we have got our sound issue resolved here. But if you can continue on, we were talking about the college vibe, the victimization of when people actually are assaulted, and you were mentioning the 16-year-old that you just were getting to the part where she was reporting.
Right. She had a flat tire, and when she got out to check the flat tire, she was hit over the head and pulled into an alley here in downtown Savannah. And once she went back to the house where she was coming from, and once she cleaned herself up, she went to the police to report it. And the first thing she was asked was, what was she wearing? And she was wearing jeans and a long sleeve t-shirt. And so that's one reason why rape is the most underreported crime, is there's a lot of shame that goes along with it, a lot of victim blaming that goes along with the crime. And so it's just it's a hard thing to report, because a lot of people do ask you, what were you doing, what were you wearing, what were you drinking, and those things should never matter.
Right. And as I was getting my head around this topic, and looking at some of the material and some of the cultural factors, and we talk a lot on this show about how our identities are shaped when we're growing up. And the things that we hear or see have a huge impact on how we are going to react when we are exposed to, I guess, for one of the better words, to say, the real world. So is there a way, or what conversations, because I don't remember my parents really having a conversation with me about rape or sexual assault. Right. There was a fear factor, kind of don't trust strangers, that kind of deal. There was definitely the talk about race and racism, but I don't remember a conversation specifically about, sexual assault. Right. Or, how, and I see some of the things in stories that I see as far as some of the things that happen in school, that may not be as innocent as what it may look like, with whether it's boys pulling girls' ponytails or, snapping their bra straps or whatever, right. What are some of the things that, based on what we're seeing, that this is so pervasive, right? Are we getting conditioned at a very early age that, oh, that's just Jimmy playing?
Sandy, I do agree with that, because my first experience, I was asked, what was my first Me Too experience? And my first Me Too experience was when I was in 3rd grade, and there was a boy at the school that was pulling up my skirt and telling me that he wanted to have sex with me. And so that was my first Me Too experience, and the school did nothing. 2 years later, when we were vacationing down in Daytona Beach, I had a couple of men corner me in the stairwell and were very inappropriate in telling me that I would look good in a white bikini.
Oh my goodness.
And I was very young. A couple years after that, I was sexually assaulted by a friend's dad. A couple of years after that, I was working at a donut shop, my first job, and the person who made the donuts felt that the other girl and I, who worked on the weekends, that he was okay to touch us on our bottoms and our breasts and brush by us very inappropriately. And when I said something to the owner of the store, his response was that he needed that man to come in and bake the donuts early in the morning more than he needed my coworker and I, who were at the front of the store taking the orders. And so if somebody was going to leave, it was going to be me. So women learn and are groomed at a very young age that this is just part of society. And then we realize there is also economic issues tied to staying silent or not staying silent. And so we are groomed at a very young age that just be quiet about this, just get by, and your economic issues. For instance, when I graduated from college, I was interviewing for a job in a congressman's office, and the chief of staff told me that if I wanted the job, I need to sleep with him first. I didn't get the job because I wasn't going to do that. But if I had chosen at that point in my life, being just out of college, if I had chosen at that point into my life to be loud about this, it would have had very severe economic issues. I would not have been able to pay my rent or my car or any of the other things, my utility bills, because I would have been blackballed as, back in the 80s and 90s. That was, and I still have a lot of concerns. You talked about the Hollywood and the politicians, and I still have a lot of concerns where I don't see this movement or this honesty or this conversation yet filtering down to the woman that is at the fast food restaurant making $7.25 an hour. That if she has a manager that's coming by and touching her inappropriately or making sexual gestures or anything else, she doesn't have the freedom yet to speak out, because her ability to feed her children or pay her rent is tied to her keeping that job. And so hopefully this discussion will get to that point in our society where it is filtered down to the minimum wage workers.
And, to that point, talking about the ramifications, the economic impact, most companies and organizations have a sexual harassment policy. And I specifically looked at, okay, let me just see what this all entails. And I've worked at companies, and, you take classes, and this is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. And if you have a complaint, this is what you do. But when you look at the bells and whistles of what you have to go through,
Right.
you really have to be intentional, to the point of thinking, okay, if I lose my job,
Right.
how am I going to survive this? And I think that's where we see, because it's like, well, why is everybody saying something now?
Right.
What took them 15 or 20 years? Well, a lot of these people that are in the, spotlight, they weren't they weren't stars at that time.
Right, absolutely. As we previously discussed, there's a lot of economics that go into that. And also there's a lot of arbitration. A lot of contracts now include where you can't go outside of the organization. You have to sign an agreement, a confidentiality agreement, where there's arbitration. And a lot of the times the person that is deciding the arbitration may be the head of the company, and he may be the person that's doing the sexual assault.
Exactly.
And so it's...
And to that point, the most recent one, and again, I don't like to speak the names of the individuals because it just gives them, I think, power. But this was, in reference to this person that was employed by the Today Show in a prominent position. And then it comes to light that there were other, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was something that had been ongoing. And I think what just rubbed me, I guess, the wrong way is when I looked at this is kind of the leadership stance that this was a clear violation of our company's standards. I just find it hard to believe that they just did not know about this. Am I wrong? Or am
No,
I just,
you're not wrong. You're absolutely
am
right.
I just a pessimistic person and
No.
thinking, how could they not have known? You have the office gossip. You have
Right.
things that go on. You have things that people talk
Water
about.
cooler talk.
Yeah, exactly. So how could they have not known?
They absolutely knew. I feel very confident. One of the famous men that kind of kicked off this whole metoo movement in this rendition of it. It was actually a movement for decades ago, but in this rendition of it out west, there were jokes made at awards shows about his ways of sexually assaulting women, the whole casting couch culture,
Right.
And it actually were actually jokes made about it, so it was very much known. It's just that nobody was willing to break it out. There was no other men willing to call it out, and that's really what it takes. This is not a women's issue. This is men need to step up and say, when locker room talk, okay, you need to tell your friends that's not funny. When you're at a dinner event and somebody makes a sexist joke, you need to tell them that's not funny. When you're at work, if you see something, if you see that a man is brushing by a woman and touching her inappropriately, it should be the men in the office that are saying, dude,
Right.
that's not cool.
Right.
Why is it, I'm still waiting for, we've had a variety of responses of these high profile cases where the men have either denied it or they've apologized and said, I regret that.
Right.
I'm still waiting for the one man that's going to come forward himself without being outed and without a woman having to step up and say and be put in the limelight. I'm still waiting for that one man to come out and say, listen, I did something 10 years ago in my career. I feel very ashamed about it. So I'm still waiting for that one man to come forward first.
Yeah, and that speaks to the, kind of the cultural influences on victimization. So one of the things that caught my attention about this was different minority groups have been socialized by their cultural norms to believe that certain sexual behaviors are permissible. In reference to race, there's this, the slaves really, the female slaves really enjoyed it. It really wasn't rape,
Right.
and it was just, that's just the way it was. And it's like, well, no. And so when the other thing is, when you've been conditioned that way generation after generation after generation, because now we have the science to support PTSD.
Right.
We have the science to support what happens to someone's DNA of how things change and adjust to stress in order to survive. And so I just wonder, because with females and the whole sexual assault, this has been going on from the beginning of time.
It has been.
There seems to be that there's either, there is some, we've just been conditioned to accept it, and you don't hear about it in places, or typically you don't hear about it in church places, or and so I'm just wondering, as we start, I'm going to take a short break here in a few minutes, but I want to get into some of the action things that we can start looking at, and what STAR is doing, and some other things that, now that everything is percolating up to the top, what are some of the other things that we can do to change that message, that narrative, in how, as females, how we look at ourselves, and then the mental health outcomes, because what we see, a lot of what happens in the school system, and we talk about, well, the parents should be involved, but some of the cases where you have children raising children, what is that saying, and how are you going to break that cycle? So I'm going to take a little short break here just to make a little announcement for our listeners as you contemplate that that conversation here. So as we prepare for the December, we want to let you know about the Rape Crisis Center's 8th annual Reindeer Run is Saturday, December 16th, beginning at 8:45 a.m. at the Savannah International Trade and Convention Center on Hutchinson Island. Events include races for all ages and a cookie contest. For more information, 912-233-3000 or r-c-c-save.org. And if you enjoy our programming on WRUU, please support the station with a donation. As an individual, you can give any amount, become a basic station member, or become a serious fan of the station. To check out membership rates and to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select to donate monthly or subscribe to an annual membership. Again, to donate to the station, go to www.wruu.org/individual and select to donate monthly or subscribe to an annual membership. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU LP. So as we continue our conversation with Christy with the STAR program here in Savannah, I do want to address, we talked about a little bit when we were chatting before we got on the air, I think that was yesterday. What if someone is, with everything happening, they really are having issues dealing with this? What is a resource that they can access?
There has this movement, the metoo movement has been a conversation that we sorely need in our nation. And it has been, part of it has been therapeutic, because there's women that felt that they were alone that are now realized that they weren't the only one. So there is a therapeutic value about it, but there's also a trauma-inducing value, or not value, but trauma-inducing aspect of this as well, in that this is every day, and it's bringing up a lot of issues that women felt that they had dealt with or stuffed very deep inside. A lot more of my friends, I hear them having nightmares. Just there's a lot more women just saying, I need still, decades later, I'm still processing this. And they thought that they had processed it, and they're realizing there's not. So there's a lot of PTSD. But the Rape Crisis Center, we have an excellent Rape Crisis Center. I would venture it's probably the best in the country, although I'm very biased about the work that they do, and I do not serve on their board or in any official capacity, but I am aware of their services. And they have their phone number is 233-3000, and you can get therapy or counseling services at any point, whether you're rape or sexual assault happened 40 years ago or whether it happened yesterday. And so with this movement, if it's feeling like a Band-Aid has been torn off and you feel like you need to see somebody, they are available for you. And they also have a 24-hour crisis line. Well over a decade ago, I did volunteer on their 24-hour crisis line, and I would get some women at 2 o'clock in the morning calling, and after being woken up from nightmare, needing somebody to talk to. And so that service is available as well. Additionally, with our district attorney's office, if you have a case that is in the court system, they do have a victim advocate there as well, and so does the Right Crisis Center. They also have victim advocates as well, and there is a program in the state of Georgia that if you have a case in progress, that you can fill out paperwork and be reimbursed for your therapy or your expenses or your co-payment expenses. And so those programs are there for women and men to get assistance and therapy and help process what is happening. And there is no right way or wrong way. I was talking to a young teenage woman yesterday, and she was having some difficulties because her friends felt that she was handling like, oh, it couldn't have been that bad because you look good. You don't seem like you're having a crisis situation. And there is no right way or wrong way to heal or grieve or process when you've had a sexual violence, something that has happened to you like that.
And on that note, one of the things I do want to get some more insight on, because I was appalled when I discovered this, is the amount of backlog of rape test kits that have not been processed, and specifically for Savannah, but I'm sure this is not only a problem in the Savannah community. Can you speak to that and give me an idea? Because for me, if I try to get a sense of numbers,
right?
You know, how many, and I'm sure this is not something that just happened this year.
Right.
How long has this been going on?
In Savannah, Scott Holcomb, Representative Scott Holcomb, helped sponsor a bill, SB 304, that was passed last year. As a requirement of that bill, all police stations had to turn over backlogged rape kits here in Georgia. This is a nationwide problem. Georgia's not alone in this.
Okay.
When I was told by the person that heads up the Special Victims Unit here in Savannah that when they turned over the kits, there were kits that here dated back into Savannah until 1998 or prior. So we had decades worth of kits that were turned over to the GBI. As a result, and this number is widely reported in a number of very credible news stations and on websites that particularly deal with this, but as a result of SB 304, there was 10,314 rape kits across the state of Georgia that had been sitting in police evidence locker rooms or wherever that were turned over.
You got to say that number to me again, because my mind just kind of went into crazy mode. Right. What was that number?
10,314 rape kits that contain forensic evidence, DNA.
So, you know, I mean, if you've already been a victim and how do we get past this? How do we resolve this issue? I mean, is it some directive that, you know, you need to be able to process, 5 kits a day or 10 a week, or, I mean, what's being done?
Well, here in Georgia, the state legislature did increase some funding for the GBI crime labs, and it was touted with the 2017-2018 budget that the GBI would be able to process 1,320 kits per year. But when you're talking about 10,314 kits, also the GBI did confirm that this year, since January to October, the first 10 months of the year, there were approximately 2,400 new kits that were submitted to GBI labs. So the current funding for the legislature the legislator in the state of Georgia is not adequate. It's not even adequate to process the kits that are being generated. The GBI has released some numbers. I believe that they're statistically improbable, that of how many kits that they have tested. But I know from talking to the Attorney General Mike DeWine in Ohio that there can be success. When he realized that this was a problem in Ohio, they had 14,000 rape kits that were backlogged that were turned over to his crime labs. He doubled his staff. He hired all new scientists, doubled his equipment, doubled his space for testing these. One thing different that they do in Ohio is that they test every single piece of evidence that comes in that rape kit. In Georgia, I've been told by the GBI that they test the one piece of evidence, and their policy is to test the one piece of evidence that has the most DNA. And so as a result, in Georgia, from what I've read in the papers and the numbers that I've processed, Georgia's getting about 8% CODIS hits, where in Ohio, they're getting 40% CODIS hits. And so when they run those through the FBI database, they're identifying these cold, decades-old rape cases, and they're prosecuting them. And so in 1 year, Attorney General Mike DeWine in Ohio, he was able to, out of the 14,000 kits that were backlogged, he was able to process 12,500 of them. And he was getting 40% CODIS hits. And then on his new kits, he's averaging 21, 22 days on those kits, where in Georgia, we're averaging months or much longer in some situations. And so he has really led the charge, and Ohio has become a national best practice of how this needs to be done and should be done. Additionally, he took his officers and sent them to the areas in Ohio that were hardest hit, that had the most backlogs. And so he gave backup law enforcement to the areas like Cleveland that needed the most help. And they have successfully prosecuted these cases. When the movie I Am Evidence, which is an HBO documentary, was screened here at the Savannah Film Festival, it's going to be aired on HBO nationally in the spring. But one of the women that was in that movie from Kentucky, her case was a 17-year-old cold case.
Oh my goodness.
And when they tested her forensic evidence rape kit, they found that it was connected to other rapes. It was a man that was, raping across state lines. So while in Savannah, out of the 10,314 kits, or in the Coastal Empire, it has been estimated that there were approximately 600 came from the Coastal Empire. The concern is still there's 10,314 untested rape kits, and anybody can get anywhere in Georgia in a matter of a few hours. Right. And one statistic that's particularly alarming is that 25% of all rapes are committed by serial rapists. So if you take those 10,314 kits and 25% of those are serial rapists, we could be preventing a lot of rape.
Exactly.
The woman that I spoke of, the 16-year-old that I spoke earlier of, there is no way that is not the modus operandi of a first-time rapist. Right. And so that man, most likely, had these kits not been backlogged, would have been off the streets, and that child would not have been raped.
That, I think, as you were talking, is I was sitting here thinking, how many of these could be prevented? Right. And it is mind-boggling to me that there is this problem when we were supposed to be so technology oriented, and we have this perception of ourselves as this country of being a caring nation. And I think what's the awakening point for many people now, the frustration or that aha moment is, we're not all that.
No, we're not. We're not.
And in order to get to being one human nation, you have to go through a reconciliation process. You have to go through really looking at the truth, no matter how painful it is, because we need healing tremendously in our country, in our city, in our community. We need this healing. And so on that note, I do want you to address kind of the process what happens? Is there a disparity in service when you get a call in Savannah, you know, because this is where we are. And like I said, I don't think that it's exclusively in Savannah that this happens. But, you know, the focus of the show is what is it going to take for us to become one human nation? Is there a disparity in the response depending on who has been assaulted?
Absolutely, there is. That was also addressed in the movie I Am Evidence. When a woman is sexually assaulted and raped, her body is the crime scene. And when she reports to the hospital, it takes 6 to 8 hours or more. One of the women that I recently spoke with, her sexual assault exam took 10 and a half hours that she was in the hospital and being questioned and examined. Your very invasive photos, evidence, it's something that it's just very difficult. It really, part of it is trauma. That alone is traumatized in itself. But in the movie I Am Evidence, they interviewed a SANE nurse, which are nurses that are specially qualified and trained to collect evidence in these rape cases. And she said that when she got a phone call where it said, "Come right away," she knew that the victim was either white or well connected within the black community, such as a pastor's daughter or a politician's daughter.
Okay.
She said that when she got another phone call, the other phone call that says, "Come when you can," she knew that the victim was black. And so, yes, there is very much a disparity on how we deal with these cases. Recently, here in Savannah, we had 2 women that were raped at Savannah State campus, and their kits sat on the shelf and were not processed until after there was a white victim at Candler Hospital. And so we do have this disparity in our own community. It's a nationwide problem, and also a problem here in Savannah. And so that is an important thing to address. And no woman wants to. I mean, Sandy, I'm sure that you don't want to go to the hospital for 10 and a half hours. And
you don't want to go to the hospital anyway.
Combing your hair from around your body, brushing you. You don't want that, and the questioning and the photos and everything that goes along with that. That's not something that any woman wants to do. But we need to also realize that those cases that where a woman has, like I said earlier, rape is the most underreported crime. Those cases where there is a sexual assault forensic evidence kit collected are small in proportion to the huge problem. So if we can't even address, if we can't even test those 10,314 kits and give those women closure and telling those women you are important and this kit contains evidence from the crime that was committed against you, and if we can't even have the ability to give those women what they need to say, "I believe you and I'm testing your kit,"
and so why should I
address the problem as a bigger issue as being the most underreported crime? Or
if you are then in that position, why should I believe that the system is going to work for me if it hasn't worked for all these other women?
Correct.
And so there's this huge level of distrust because the system is broken, and so many of our systems in this country are broken systems.
Right.
And, there is, I've heard it said, well, when something is broken, it's like a pot, when it's broken, that's when the light can come through, and that's where, the plant can come through or whatever, that when you're dealing with human lives and the impact that it has for generations, I'm not sure how to change that wave, and that's what I like about this metoo movement, because I think we have to get to a critical mass of people that just say, you know what, I'm just going to tell you what happened, and the more it's done, it's my hope, because I do have hope through all of this, that things will get better. So on a local level, what are some of the things upcoming that people can participate in?
Well, as far as a local issue, part of the problem is funding. There is not adequate funding For instance, the police, they have 5 SVU detectives that work on all felony cases. 5. And if they worked their caseload to what it needs to be done, they would be working 162 hours per week. That's also the same in the district attorney's office. They have 2 district attorneys that deal with the rape issue, and they also have 2 other issues as well. I believe it's domestic violence and vehicular homicide. And so you basically have 2/3 of an attorney working on prosecuting rape cases.
Right.
And so it needs to be addressed by local politicians in city council and county commission that more funding is needed. And so that's just part of the issue on that side of it. A lot of it boils down to finances and more money being needed.
Did I see something come across in this is a wonderful world of Facebook that there is an event that's coming up on December 6th?
Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday from 10 to noon at downtown at the Coastal Center.
Okay.
And it is the Rape Crisis Center. Again, I just want to disclose that I'm not officially with the Rape Crisis Center, but I am aware of this event coming up, and it sounds like a fabulous event where they're going to be talking about the backlog kits and what past, present, and future. And I'm anxious myself. I don't know anything about the speaker, and I'm anxious to listen to what she has to say and learn more myself. So I hope people will come out. Like you're saying, the discussion of this is important, that we can keep discussing this, and hopefully, while me and my generation stayed silent, hopefully by discussing this future, our granddaughters someday won't have to stay silent, because this is something that will be continuing to be talked about.
So is there a Facebook page for the Savannah Taking Action for Resistance? Is STAR?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
it's a Facebook group. And within the group, there is an additional page that's called STAR, Raising Our Voices Against Rape and Sexual Assault, that people are welcome to join. A lot of what we talk about in the group is national and local issues, but also the difference about how boys and girls are raised. Mm-hmm. We teach our girls not to get raped, where we need to also be teaching our boys not to rape. And I did something after the metoo movement started. I was asked to facilitate a group at Common Grounds, which holds every Wednesday at the Foundry. Mm-hmm. And it was a mixed group of both men and women, SCAD students, retirees. It's a very, very diverse group. And so what I did is I drew a line down the chalkboard, and on one side of the chalkboard I asked the men in the room what they had done personally to prevent themselves from being sexually assaulted.
Right.
And one SCAD student said that he walks fast at night when he's, at night. Another person said that they know karate. And then another man said that he kind of puffs up his chest when he's feeling intimidated. And that was all the men had to say. There was a large room, only a few things. So then I went to the women in the room and said, what have you personally done to not get sexually assaulted and be assaulted? And instinctually, these women in the room just started listing things off. From when I am leaving in a parking lot out of a mall, I take my hair out of a ponytail, because it's easier for somebody that wants to assault you to grab a whole ponytail versus just a piece of your hair. I have mace on my keychains. I carry my keychains in my hand in a way that I can hit somebody. I have a rape issue, or a rape whistle. I look at my car, I look under it, I look in the back seat before I open the door. I'm always aware of my surroundings. If I have a bottle of water, I make sure that the seal is not broken, that somebody hasn't put anything in there. I walk with partners. I let people know where I'm going. I let people know when I've arrived home. I don't get in an elevator if I'm alone with a man in an elevator. I don't leave my drink at a bar. I make sure that I see the bartender pouring the drink. I mean, just on and on. These women were telling things that were instinctually. And I actually brought a gift for you, Sandy. This is a little pink kitty cat keychain that you can keep on your keychain. And when you walk, you can just put your fingers through it, and it just kind of gives you a little
a little bit more leverage than
yeah,
just holding your keys in between your...
and it's not meant to, if you are ever, God forbid, assaulted, it gives you just one opportunity to jab, scream, and run.
Exactly.
Yes. You don't want to stay there and keep fighting, but it just gives you that opportunity to jab, scream, and run. And an interesting thing about that item that I just handed you was that Amazon still sells bump stocks, which were used in Las Vegas. Amazon does not sell those items anymore, because particularly the one that I have on my keychain is metal. They are classified under Georgia law as being brass knuckles. And so,
great.
Yeah, if I put the one that I have is metal, and if Georgia law says that I can have this as an open carry, but if I put my keys in my pocket or my purse. I'm committing a misdemeanor, and the second occasion would be a felony.
Let me ask you a question. Based on that scenario that you did, that demonstration that you did for the people attending, what was the response to the males when they saw that?
They were floored. They were blown away. They did not realize that women, there's so much, and it's not necessarily even things that have been taught to us as girls. It's something that we just instinctually know.
Or we've heard it.
Yeah, we've heard it. We've been to self-defense classes,
right.
So we've heard it. But it's also just something that, as a woman, your reality is very different. Or it's
my responsibility.
Right.
I think that's the key. And for me as an African-American woman, I know what I've read is, because I wear my hair like this, I wear a bun.
Right.
And it's just like a ponytail.
Right.
It's that one thing they can grab hold to bring you down.
Right.
And so you don't want anything like that, And so it really, I think it's that knowing on some level, you just don't want somebody to say, well, what were you doing there? Why were you walking at 4 a.m. or running at 5 a.m. or whatever?
Right.
It's that, I need to take responsibility to make sure that I'm not doing anything to bring harm upon myself. But I guess the other part for me, the reality of this is when you have the amount of sexual predators that realistically that we probably have out there that we don't want to even get our heads around, it is necessary to be aware. And I just wonder how much of this is taught, in the schools for males and females.
Right.
To be aware. And I do want people to know that we're not ignoring males that have been assaulted.
No, not at all.
But the majority is with females, and that's the only reason why we're focusing on females.
Right.
So I don't want anybody to go, well, men are assault, So
Absolutely.
It's a little bit,
and the services through the Rape Crisis Center are available to men, women, and children. But you mentioned about, women running. My husband, he goes walking, and when he goes walking or he takes our dog walking or to walk around the neighborhood, he wears his earbuds in both ears. There are so many women that I know that when they are running or walking, they don't wear earbuds at all, or they'll wear one and not the other so that they can continue to remain. And that's not equitable.
No, it's not.
It's not. And so, like I said, we've established the conversation historically over centuries of what women, you have a responsibility not to get raped. And we're not doing enough to teaching our boys. And I, there's a lot of things I've messed up in my life, but the one thing I've done is I've taught my 16-year-old what consent is and what consent is not.
Wow.
And we had a change in the curriculum, a slight change in our sex ed curriculum here in Savannah-Chatham County, in that this year, for the first time, there is a slight consent piece added, but it's still not enough. We need to do a much better job teaching our boys what consent is and not to rape, not to become rapists.
Right. Christy, I can't believe how quickly the time has gone by, and I want to.
There's so much more.
There's so much more, and so I do want to invite you to come back.
Absolutely.
And kind of keep us updated. And I'm sure I'll see you out and about in the city on this. I even hate to use the word important topic because it's a critical issue. And I think for some reason I just seem to feel more connected to these issues in Savannah. Maybe it's because it's a smaller city than being in a big city, so you can't really hide from it.
Right.
Maybe that's the other part of it. It just seems to be a vibe that I pick up here more so than where I moved from, which was a larger city. Not that it was any safer there, but it's just I seem to feel it more in Savannah. So I do encourage you to come back to share with us, what's
Absolutely,
going
Sandy.
on,
Would
and
be
if
my pleasure.
and definitely, maintain contact with me and let me know if there's something that I can do on my side to announce something or post it on the One Human Nation website which is onehumannation.info, and we will be recording this show and posting it there. But as I wrap up, because I see the next show host coming in, and that's going to be Troy Stoner with Sound Limit. So we're going to wrap up here, but thank you so much,
Sandy. I
Christy,
appreciate
for
it.
being here. I appreciate you taking your time out and actually coming into the studio also. It was as much fun as this topic could be, so thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for opening the dialogue on this and letting people, giving them the opportunity to think about this. Thank you.
Thank you.